The Apex Army had come to Earth with a single purpose: annihilation. Their mission was simple: wipe out humanity's last remnants, sterilize the planet, and lay the foundations for a new Apex colony. They had conquered worlds far and wide, their empire stretching across galaxies, each victory marked by fire and fear. Nothing stood in their way. Not armies, not fleets, not even the most advanced alien civilizations. The Apex were the apex predators of the universe, or so they thought. The military force that stood before Kala was vast. 25 soldiers, all armed with the latest in energy weaponry, drones, and armor that could withstand the harshest blows. They were the elite, battle-hardened and genetically enhanced, trained for years in the art of war. Their suits gleamed under the cold alien sun. They had faced and decimated entire species, yet none of their previous conquest had prepared them for Earth, a planet they had long regarded as insignificant, until now. Their arrival had been swift, precise. They'd dropped down into the wilderness of the north, remote, isolated, where no human witnesses would be left alive to tell the tale. Kala, however, was not the meek and fragile human they expected. They had tracked her for days, but she was a shadow, silent, swift, and too elusive for their technology to catch. Her very presence on this hostile planet had left their sensors scrambling, glitching in ways they couldn't explain. This, however, was the moment they had come for. The soldiers closed in, surrounding her in a tight perimeter. It wasn't the first time they had dealt with a lone target, but it would be their last. Kala stood at the center of their circle, outnumbered, her small frame hidden beneath the ragged cloak she had scavenged from the remnants of the wilderness. She looked barely out of her teens, just a girl no older than 17. Her wild, dark hair fell around her shoulders in messy tangles, and dirt smeared across her face only accentuated the contrast between her youth and the seasoned killers before her. The Apex soldiers waited, their blasters humming quietly as if anticipating the moment when they would unleash their firepower. They exchanged silent glances, calculating the odds of taking her down quickly. After all, she was human. Weak. Outclassed. Target identified, one soldier whispered into his helmet mic. She's alone. Not for long, another muttered, his eyes narrowing with contempt. Let's make this quick. But Kala didn't move. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stood there, her breath slow, steady, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. Her dark eyes met theirs, unwavering. She wasn't afraid. A soldier took a step forward, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel. His fingers twitched near the trigger of his weapon. "You should have stayed out of our way, human," he growled, his voice distorted through his helmet. "This won't take long." Kala didn't respond. She simply tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. The soldier, unnerved by the girl's calm demeanor, hesitated. In that moment, the wind seemed to pick up. Kala's eyes flickered, her senses sharpening. She wasn't just seeing them, she was feeling them. Each heartbeat, each breath, each shift in their stance. A life lived on Earth, a world that had once been a deadly paradise for her ancestors, had prepared her for this. Her body was attuned to violence, to survival in a way they could never understand. The soldiers, despite their technology, had one fatal flaw. They underestimated her. They believed that she, this child, was just like every other primitive human they had encountered. What they didn't know was that Kala had something they lacked, the edge of someone who had survived not just a harsh world, but a brutal history. Her fists clenched, not in anger, but in readiness. She wasn't just a target. She was a predator. And now she was ready to strike. This sets up the tension, establishing Kala as someone far beyond what the Apex soldiers could anticipate, without revealing too much just yet. It focuses on the soldiers' underestimation of her and builds anticipation for the action to come. The silence broke in a flash. The Apex soldiers, already set into their formations, moved in sync, as if rehearsed, their footfalls echoing across the wild, rugged landscape. 25 soldiers in perfect lockstep, their weapons aimed, their eyes cold. Kala's heart hammered in her chest, but her expression remained calm. The air buzzed with anticipation, the moment hanging in balance. The first soldier, too eager to finish the task, made the mistake of charging too quickly. He fired a single shot, an energy bolt that whizzed past Kala, narrowly missing her. She barely moved, her eyes tracking the trajectory of the shot. She wasn't distracted. She was already calculating. In one fluid motion, Kala darted to the side, sidestepping the second soldier's charge, grabbing his wrist in a move so fast the soldier couldn't even react. His energy rifle went off in the air, the bolt blasting into the earth with a hum. With a swift, brutal twist, she drove her elbow into his side, right under the joint of his armored plating. His cry of pain was cut short as Kala swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing into the ground with an audible thud. The soldiers froze for a moment. That first attack had been quick, so quick they couldn't process it. Kala wasn't just avoiding them, she was dismantling them. "Fire!" shouted one of the soldiers, his voice rough through the mic. His command broke the hesitation, and a volley of energy bolts flew toward her. The air hummed with their intensity, but Kala wasn't there. In a blur of motion, she rolled under the first wave of fire, a fluid tumble that brought her behind a boulder. She knew how to use her environment. Every rock, every tree, every shift in the terrain gave her the advantage. The Apex soldiers weren't used to someone so unpredictable. They were trained to engage head-on in controlled circumstances, where everything was calculated. But here, on Earth, Kala's entire existence had been a fight against unpredictability. She had grown up in a world where survival meant adapting, evolving, and using whatever she could to her advantage. As the soldiers tried to regroup, Kala used her moment to her advantage, climbing the boulder with surprising speed, her bare feet finding solid purchase even as she leaped into the air. She landed behind two of the soldiers who barely had time to turn before she kicked one squarely in the chest, sending him tumbling backward into the dirt. The second soldier had no time to react before she grabbed his arm and used it to propel herself into a spinning kick that knocked him out cold. The remaining soldiers froze, stunned by the efficiency and raw power of her strikes. A few of them had barely raised their weapons before their comrades were already incapacitated. Her speed, her strength, was something they had never encountered in any enemy. "Flank her. Use the drones," General Vrax barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The soldiers split into smaller squads, each one attempting to surround her. Drones whirred to life, hovering overhead, their targeting systems locking onto her position. But Kala didn't panic. She didn't even hesitate. She darted out of cover, running toward the nearest drone, weaving between trees as energy blasts from both the soldiers and the hovering machines tore through the air. Kala dropped low, rolling just as one of the drones fired, narrowly missing her. She took advantage of the sudden distraction, throwing herself forward and grabbing the drone by its wing. With a strength that shouldn't have been possible for her size, she tore the weapon free, using it as a shield as she sprinted toward the next group of soldiers. The first soldier she reached didn't even have time to aim before she slammed the drone into his chest, knocking him to the ground. The others didn't have time to react before she was already on them, slipping past their defenses, finding weak spots in their armor, striking hard and fast. It was chaos, and in that chaos, the Apex Army began to realize something they couldn't deny. This was no ordinary human. She wasn't just a girl. She was a force of nature. They had expected easy prey. What they were facing instead was a nightmare, one that moved too fast, too unpredictably for them to control. The once confident soldiers, who had entered the battlefield with certainty and arrogance, were now second-guessing every step they took. Some hesitated, unsure if they should follow orders. Others began to doubt their own training. It wasn't fear yet, but it was close. Kala's eyes narrowed as she fought on, calculating her every move. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a statement, and she was just getting started. This continuation ramps up the action by showcasing Kala's resourcefulness, adaptability, and sheer physical prowess. It highlights the soldiers' growing uncertainty and sets the stage for the deeper challenges they will face as they continue to underestimate her. The stakes keep rising and the tension builds, ensuring the reader is hooked for the next part. The battle had become something they hadn't prepared for, something they couldn't control. The Apex soldiers, seasoned in slaughter across the galaxy, had never been forced into such a chaotic, desperate fight. Their usual tactics of overwhelming force and precise targeting seemed to falter against this single, unrelenting human girl. Kala had proven that unpredictability was just as deadly as firepower, and it was beginning to chip away at their confidence. A group of soldiers attempted to close in on her from the right, flanking her as they had been trained to do. But she was already gone. No warning, no hesitation. She darted between the trees, a blur of motion faster than they could track. Their sensors beeped wildly, trying to lock onto her heat signature. But Kala wasn't where they thought she was. She had already moved, using the cover of the forest to remain hidden, even as the Apex soldiers fumbled to regroup. "She's too fast. We can't," one of the soldiers shouted, but his words were cut short by the crackling of a close-range shot. A small energy bolt zipped past his head, narrowly missing him. Kala had emerged from the trees behind them, tossing a rock into the air to distract their sensors before she made her move. She threw herself at the soldier closest to her, sending him sprawling to the ground with a powerful strike. Her fists connected with his helmet with brutal force, the sound of it reverberating in the air. He didn't move after the hit. Knocked, out cold, they had been sloppy, overconfident, and now their numbers were starting to thin. The remaining soldiers began to realize the truth. They weren't just dealing with an enemy who was fighting for survival. They were facing a human whose instincts were honed to the edge of lethal precision. She wasn't just surviving, she was dismantling them. And this thought, this horrifying realization, began to take root in the soldiers' minds. A soldier named Kresh, a heavyset veteran, wiped blood from his lip and glanced over at his comrades. "We're losing control," he muttered through his comms, his voice thick with panic. "We can't keep up with her, she's different." General Vrax, from his vantage point, scowled. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. Earth had been categorized as one of the easiest planets to conquer, its inhabitants weak, its terrain predictable. But Kala had shattered all of that. She was quick, resourceful, and far more dangerous than a girl her size should be. The general clenched his fists, frustration simmering beneath his cool exterior. "Fall back," Vrax commanded, his voice steely. "Flank her from all sides. Do not underestimate her again." But it was already too late. The Apex soldiers, attempting to form a more coordinated front, began to fan out across the battlefield. They started to anticipate where she might appear next, their movements synchronizing as they relied on their training and technology. But Kala wasn't playing by their rules. She had no pattern. She didn't fight like they were taught to expect. And that, more than anything, was what put them at a disadvantage. As they attempted to close in, Kala moved like water, fluid, relentless, and impossible to predict. She dashed into a small ravine, drawing a group of 3 soldiers after her. They followed, but by the time they reached the bottom, she was gone. One of the soldiers cursed, his armor clanking as he spun around. Before he could react, Kala appeared from above, dropping from a ledge like a predator. With her momentum, she struck him in the back with a shoulder that drove the soldier face first into the dirt. The other 2 soldiers turned to fire, but Kala was already gone, slipping between them like a shadow. Behind them, another squad was struggling to keep up. The weight of their armor and the tight formation they adhered to were slowing them down. By the time they got their bearings and readied their weapons, she was already back on top of them, dropping from a different vantage point, catching them off guard. Her elbows and knees struck with pinpoint accuracy, knocking one soldier's rifle out of his hands and incapacitating another with a swift strike to the throat. "Damn it! We've lost half our unit," Kresh shouted again, panic creeping into his voice. How can a child be doing this? Vrax's anger bubbled over, but there was no time to waste on his rage. He needed to take control. With a growl, he issued new orders. "Disperse. Do not let her isolate you. Spread out. Make it impossible for her to—" But his voice faltered as Kala's form flashed behind him, faster than he could react. She wasn't just avoiding their fire. She was dissecting their strategy and turning it against them. They were no longer a unified force. They were broken, scattered, and out of sync. The general's heart pounded in his chest. This was not how it was supposed to go. What they had written off as a primitive world, a weak human race, was fighting back in a way no one could have predicted. The Apex Army had underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price for it. As the soldiers looked around, their fear started to show. They had been trained to believe that no one could stand against them. But this girl, this human, was proving that theory wrong. And somewhere, deep down, they knew they were losing. Losing to a species they thought they had already conquered. They were realizing too late that they had never truly understood the enemy they faced. In this section, the stakes are raised as the Apex soldiers' confidence begins to crumble under Kala's unexpected and relentless attacks. The soldiers start questioning their strategy and the true nature of their enemy. The tension builds, and we get a clearer sense that Kala is not just a threat but a symbol of humanity's resistance, dangerous and unpredictable. General Vrax's patience had worn thin. His soldiers were losing ground, and the situation was deteriorating faster than he could manage. The once confident Apex Army now moved in disarray, their attempts at formation shattered by the chaos Kala had caused. With every passing minute, more of his elite soldiers fell, their bodies littering the battlefield as Kala continued to strike from the shadows, appearing and vanishing with uncanny precision. Vrax's pride, his experience, and his iron grip on command were all slipping away. He clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles cracking beneath the armored gloves. He had seen entire fleets fall to his will, entire species bow to his power. Yet here, on this insignificant rock of a planet, one human girl was turning his campaign into a nightmare. Enough, Vrax muttered, his voice low and controlled, though there was a storm beneath his words. No more games. I will end this, myself. He didn't wait for his soldiers to recover. With a single motion, he detached the control interface on his forearm and activated his personal battle mode. His armor hummed to life, glowing a menacing red as energy coursed through the suit systems. A towering figure over 8 feet tall, Vrax was a behemoth among men. The armor was made of the finest materials Apex science had to offer, strong enough to withstand nuclear blasts and energized for maximum impact. His helmet slid into place with a hiss, the HUD flickering with strategic data that confirmed his superiority. Vrax to all units, fall back and regroup. I'm handling this, he ordered, his voice resonating through the comm system with authority. As he stepped forward, the ground shook beneath his boots, each heavy stride causing cracks to form in the dirt. He was a walking weapon, and this was going to be over. The remaining Apex soldiers, bloodied but loyal, withdrew from the immediate area, creating a ring of protection around their general as he advanced toward Kala. Kala, however, didn't retreat. She didn't flinch. Instead, she locked her gaze onto the towering form of Vrax, her breath steady despite the chaos of battle that still raged around her. She could feel the change in the air, the shift in the battlefield. This wasn't just another soldier. This was the apex predator of the Apex Army, and he was coming for her. Vrax's voice boomed from his helmet. You are outmatched, human. Your efforts have been impressive, but this ends now. Kala didn't respond. Her feet remained planted as she analyzed him. The way he moved, the weight of his steps, the slight pauses in his aggressive gait. He was strong, yes, but his arrogance made him predictable. She knew she couldn't outmatch him in sheer power, but power wasn't everything. If she could exploit his weaknesses, she could win. The ground trembled again as Vrax charged. His massive fist swung down toward Kala like a hammer, the sheer force of the blow creating a shockwave that sent the surrounding dirt and debris flying. Kala ducked under the punch with a fluid roll, narrowly avoiding the attack. The force of his strike left a crater where she had stood, a reminder of just how dangerous he was. But Kala wasn't done. She sprang up from the ground, faster than Vrax could react, and darted behind him, using his momentum against him. She lashed out, with a kick that landed square on his armored knee joint. The impact wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough to make him stagger just for a moment. Vrax growled in frustration and spun around, swinging his fist once more, but Kala had already vanished, disappearing into the shadows of the surrounding trees. She was a blur, a ghost on the battlefield. He couldn't catch her. His sensors were struggling to track her. Clever, Vrax muttered to himself, his voice laced with both anger and respect. He adjusted his combat systems, recalibrating his targeting algorithms, but Kala had already anticipated the move. She wasn't going to play his game. Instead, she would make him play hers. The moment of hesitation was all she needed. Kala reappeared from the opposite direction, using her environment to her advantage. A quick dash, a split-second decision, and she was on him again, this time aiming for the weakest spot she could find, the exposed joint where his armor met, the back of his neck. With one precise strike, she slammed her fist into the gap in his armor. The force caused a loud crack as the plating bent inward, just enough to send a pulse of energy into the suit's internal circuitry. Sparks flew from his helmet as his systems began to glitch. Vrax staggered backward, his arms flailing to regain balance. The moment of weakness was brief, but enough for Kala to land another devastating blow, this time to the side of his head. Vrax reeled, disoriented by the blow. His hands gripped his helmet, his body swaying from the impact. For the first time, in the fight, the general was vulnerable. His advanced technology couldn't keep up with the unpredictable ferocity of a human who had fought to survive every day of her life. Breathing heavily, Kala took a step back. Her eyes locked onto his, calculating her next move. For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. This wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. This section amps up the intensity of the battle, showing that Vrax, despite his overwhelming strength and advanced technology, is not invincible. Kala's ability to exploit his weaknesses and the hesitation creeping into the general's mind sets the stage for a final, high-stakes confrontation. The clash between these two forces, one driven by pure power and the other by sheer adaptability, is now in full force. Vrax's breathing was heavy, his chest heaving beneath the thick plating of his battlesuit. His helmet crackled as his internal systems struggled to recalibrate. Sparks continued to fly from the side of his head, where Kala's last blow had short-circuited the targeting systems. For the first time since landing on Earth, he felt something akin to doubt, a sensation that had no place in the mind of the Apex General. The girl, this human, wasn't just fast. She was intelligent, calculating. She knew how to fight in ways that didn't make sense to him. Every time he swung his fists, every time he fired his weapon, she was already one step ahead. It was as if she could read his movements before he made them, adapting in real time. But he was General Vrax. He had fought wars for centuries, had been the supreme force in dozens of systems. He could not afford to falter now. His reputation, his empire, and his pride were on the line. With a growl, he straightened up, forcing the malfunctioning systems into a temporary shutdown. The spark stopped, but the damage was done. He was weaker, slower, but he could not, lose to a mere human. Kala's eyes never left him, watching as his armor shifted, his stance growing more determined. She didn't feel the same uncertainty, the same hesitation. The longer they fought, the clearer it became. Vrax was a force of pure power, but she was the embodiment of survival. In her, every motion was about adapting, finding a way, even when there didn't seem to be one. She had lived on Earth's hostile terrain for years, and this battle felt no different. This was the fight for her very existence. Vrax lunged, his fist aimed directly for her head. This time, Kala didn't dodge. Instead, she planted her feet, and at the last possible moment, she dove beneath him, skimming the ground with the grace of a predator. Vrax's fist slammed into the earth, creating a crater with the force of the blow. But Kala was already up, slipping behind him again, faster than his sensors could track. "Why won't you just die?" Vrax growled through his gritted teeth, swinging his massive arm in an arc to clear the space around him. But Kala was gone again, vanishing into the underbrush. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She was the embodiment of the one thing the Apex had never understood: persistence. Humans might not be the strongest, the fastest, or the most technologically advanced, but they were born with an unyielding drive to survive. And that drive was what made them so dangerous. Suddenly, she reappeared in front of him, moving faster than he could process, launching herself off a nearby boulder and driving both of her knees into his midsection. Vrax's armor groaned as the force of the blow rattled him, knocking the wind from his lungs. The general staggered back, clutching at his chest. His vision swam, and for a fleeting moment, he felt the sting of vulnerability, the rare sensation of being overpowered. This was no longer just a skirmish. It was a war of wills. Kala's attacks were not just physical. They were psychological, wearing him down, forcing him to question his every move. He had expected to crush her, to wipe her out in an instant, but each strike she landed made it clear she wasn't afraid of him, and that was something Vrax hadn't prepared for. He roared in frustration and turned his body to unleash a full-energy blast from his suit's chest array. A pulse of deadly light shot out, cutting through the trees, vaporizing anything in its path. Kala dove sideways, narrowly avoiding the blast. The blast, powerful as it was, tore through the ground, sending dirt and debris flying in every direction. The explosion temporarily blinded her, throwing off her sense of direction. Her ears rang, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. Every second of hesitation could be her last. From the dust and smoke, Kala emerged like a shadow, her form barely visible but her presence undeniable. Her eyes locked onto the general, the deep primal instinct inside her pushing her forward. She was starting to tire, but it didn't matter. She had come too far. She would not be the one to fall here today. Vrax's suit hummed with power, but there was a crack in his confidence now, a crack that Kala could exploit. The once imposing figure of the general seemed less invincible in that moment, his movements slower, more deliberate. The cracks in his armor weren't just physical, they were mental too, and Kala would be the one to shatter them. With a final, decisive motion, Kala lunged, using the moment of Vrax's uncertainty to deliver a punishing strike to his side, her fist crashing into the weakened joint in his armor. Vrax grunted in pain, the force of the hit knocking him off balance. He staggered, his systems whirring, and in that moment something shifted, something important. For the first time since they had begun, Vrax found himself on the defensive, and it was in that moment of vulnerability that Kala realized. This battle wasn't about strength, it was about endurance, about the will to keep fighting even when everything seemed impossible. And right now, it was her will that was winning. In this section, the battle continues to escalate, with Vrax struggling against Kala's relentless persistence. She isn't just surviving, she's outsmarting and outlasting him. The tension is building, and it's becoming clear that the general, despite his overwhelming strength, is starting to lose control of the situation. Kala's adaptability and sheer will to survive are proving to be his greatest threat, and the power dynamics on the battlefield have begun to shift in her favor. General Vrax's mind was a storm of frustration and confusion. The girl, this human, had done the impossible. She had not only survived his overwhelming power, but she was pushing him to the edge of his capabilities. Every moment, every attack, was a constant reminder that his entire empire had underestimated Earth. And now she had him on the back foot, a position he had never found himself in before. His internal systems buzzed erratically, his armor sputtering in some sections from the damage Kala had inflicted. He could still feel the weight of her punches, the pressure on his joints, the way her strikes had made him question his own superiority. The general's chest heaved as he struggled to recalibrate his targeting systems, his vision flickering, in and out, but it wasn't enough. He could feel it now, his confidence, his control slipping away. He had underestimated the human. As Kala circled him, her breath steady, she studied him like a hunter eyeing her prey. The gap between them wasn't just physical anymore, it was mental. She could sense the shift in him, the growing uncertainty, the hesitation that was now creeping into his every move. He was still dangerous, still powerful, but he was distracted. The fear, the doubt, It was like a virus spreading through his mind. He wasn't just fighting her anymore. He was fighting the idea that something so small, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, could stand against him. It was the weight of his own arrogance that had caused him to falter. It had made him believe that humanity was weak, that Earth was nothing more than a trivial stop for conquest. And now, it was too late. Vrax raised his arm, aiming his energy cannon at her again. But his movements were sluggish, slower than before. Kala didn't flinch. She moved toward him with purpose, her body low to the ground, her steps calculated and silent. Her eyes never left his, her focus absolute. She knew this was her moment. With a swift motion, she lunged toward him, her fist striking his weakened shoulder joint. The armor gave a screeching sound of protest as she drove her fist deeper into the breach, and the feedback from his internal system sent a wave of shock through his body. The cannon on his arm sparked, its power fluctuating erratically. No. Vrax grunted, his voice rasping as he staggered back, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. Kala didn't give him the time to recover. She grabbed his arm, twisting it in a move so fast it left him no chance to react. Her feet planted firmly on the ground, using his own momentum to throw him off balance. Vrax crashed to the dirt with a deafening thud. His armor rattled, and his breath came out in strained gasps. The Apex General lay on the ground, stunned, as Kala stood over him. Her silhouette framed by the pale sky, she exhaled slowly, eyes locked onto him with cold precision. The tables had turned. You... Vrax's voice trembled. You should not have survived this long. Kala's expression hardened. Survival is all I've ever known. He tried to move, to push himself up, but the damage to his suit was too severe. His hands trembled as he pushed against the earth, struggling to get to his feet. Kala crouched, staying just out of his reach, her posture predatory. She didn't need to rush. She had him exactly where she wanted him. The once mighty Apex General who had crushed planets and broken civilizations now found himself at the mercy of a single human. What did you think would happen? Kala asked, her voice low but steady. You thought you could come here, take over, and leave without consequences? Vrax growled, his pride flaring one last time, but there was a weakness in his words. I am the Apex, he spat, as if it were a mantra, an affirmation of his superiority. I am invincible. No, Kala replied, her voice cutting through the noise. You were just the first one to fall. With a final burst of energy, she dashed forward. Vrax tried to raise his arm to launch another blast, but the shot misfired, a burst of static instead of energy. His suit was malfunctioning, and his strength had nearly drained. Kala, without hesitation, delivered one final strike to his helmet, forcing him back onto the ground with a force that rattled the earth beneath him. The general's vision blurred, his body spasming from the damage, his once unstoppable will fading into nothingness. As he lay there, defeated and unable to move, Vrax's mind reeled. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated humanity. And now, in this moment, he realized something that had never once crossed his mind before. Humans weren't just resilient. They were relentless. With the general incapacitated, Kala stood tall over him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She had survived the impossible. And now the Apex Army was no longer a threat. The tide had turned. In this section, we witness the moment where General Vrax finally breaks, both physically and mentally. Kala's relentless drive has shattered his confidence, and she takes control of the situation. The shift in power is now undeniable, and Vrax's realization of his underestimation of humanity underscores the depth of his failure. The narrative sets up the final moments of the battle, with Kala standing victorious over the once invincible general. General Vrax lay on the ground, his once imposing figure now a mere shell of what it had been moments before. His armor was battered and scorched, the once sleek, fearsome design now ragged and dented. The pride of the Apex Army reduced to a broken heap of metal and flesh. His breathing was shallow, ragged, and his thoughts were a swirl of confusion and disbelief. How could this happen? Vrax wondered, his mind struggling to process the situation. How could one insignificant human do this to me? Calla stood above him, her posture unwavering as she looked down at the fallen general. Her body was bruised, her clothes torn from the intense battle. But there was a fire in her eyes that burned brighter than ever. This was the culmination of everything she had fought for. The culmination of years of struggle, survival, and defiance. This was her victory. Vrax, despite the pain, managed to lift his head just enough to glare at her. His eyes burned with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You're nothing," he growled, though his voice was weak, almost a whisper. "I will never kneel to you. Never." Calla's expression hardened. She could feel the fury emanating from him, but there was no fear, no satisfaction in her heart. There was only a quiet, almost sorrowful understanding. She had seen this before. Arrogance, pride, the desperate refusal to accept defeat. It was the hallmark of those who believed themselves invincible. It had been the Apex's downfall, and it was about to be Vrax's as well. "You won't have to," she said, her voice cold but steady. "You don't need to kneel to me. You just need to realize that you're not in control anymore." Vrax's eyes flickered with something. Maybe realization, maybe hatred, but he didn't respond. He tried to push himself up, his hands shaking with the effort, but it was clear that the power he had relied on had all but drained from him. The arrogance, the pride, the belief that the Apex army was invincible, those were all crumbling before Calla's tenacity. "You thought you were different. You thought you could just come here, conquer us, wipe us out like every other world you've taken," Calla continued, her gaze never leaving his. "But you never understood us. You never understood what it means to fight for something. To live for something." Her voice didn't waver, but Vrax's eyes betrayed his frustration. He knew the truth, but he couldn't accept it. The Apex had come to Earth with one goal: to dominate, to subjugate. They believed in the strength of their numbers, in the might of their technology, and in their ability to crush any resistance beneath their boots, but they had underestimated the heart of humanity. Calla took a step back, giving him a moment to collect himself. She could see the internal battle raging inside him, the struggle between his pride and the dawning realization that he had been defeated. But that wasn't why she was here. This wasn't about pride. This wasn't about revenge. This was about survival, about showing that humanity could stand up to anyone, no matter how strong, no matter how powerful. "Get up," Calla said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Get up and face the truth. The Apex army is finished. Your empire is done." Vrax's hands trembled as he tried to rise, his movements slow and clumsy, but it was clear that his strength was gone. He collapsed back to the ground, his body unable to support him. His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, his face contorted in anger and frustration. Calla's gaze softened just for a moment. She knelt down beside him, her face serious but not unkind. "I'm not here to kill you," she said, her tone steady. "But you need to understand this. The war you thought you were waging, it's over. You lost. We won." She stood up, her movements fluid and purposeful. The battle was won, and now it was time to finish what she had started. She turned her back to him, walking away with no ceremony. Behind her, Vrax's defeated form remained still, the dust of the battlefield settling over him like a shroud. There would be no rallying, no second chances. He had lost. Calla could feel the weight of the moment settle in. The battle had been hard, and the victory had come at a high price, but humanity had proven something that day. They could fight. They could resist. And they could win. The Apex army, once a force of unchallenged terror, had met its match in a single, determined human. And in this moment, it wasn't just Vrax who had fallen. It was the entire empire he represented. Calla wasn't just standing over a defeated general. She was standing over the wreckage of an invincible empire. But she wasn't celebrating. She wasn't gloating. Her mind was already shifting toward the future. There was still much to be done. The war might be over for now, but Earth had been scarred and there was rebuilding to be done. There were others out there who would come, drawn by the scent of failure and weakness. But Kala knew that now, humanity was ready to defend itself. She took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening, her resolve hardening like steel. She had won, and no one would ever be able to take that away from her. In this section, we see the emotional and psychological aftermath of the battle. Kala has achieved her victory, not through sheer power, but through the strength of her will and perseverance. She faces down Vrax, offering him a final moment of realization that the war is over, and his empire has fallen. This marks the end of the confrontation, but the story's deeper implications for humanity's future are just beginning to unfold. The battlefield was silent, save for the distant hum of the wind and the occasional crackle of fire still licking at the wreckage of the fallen Apex forces. The once mighty army had crumbled, scattered in disarray across the planet, its power now a shadow of what it had once been. Kala stood alone, the weight of the moment settling over her like a cloak. Her gaze drifted over the remnants of the battle, the fallen Apex soldiers, the smoldering wrecks of their advanced war machines, the wreckage of their weapons, all now neutralized. In their place, the quiet buzz of Earth's natural beauty was slowly beginning to return. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sky above, once darkened by the smoke of destruction, was now streaked with soft hues of dawn. She had won. The last of the Apex's hopes had fallen with General Vrax. His once unshakable empire had been shattered. Yet the victory, while sweet, was bittersweet. The cost of the battle had been high. The loss of life, the destruction, the damage to Earth's very fabric, it weighed heavily on her. But in that weight she found something stronger. Purpose. Turning her back to the battlefield, Kala walked toward the horizon, her body bruised and battered, but unbroken. There was still work to be done. Earth had won, but the war had left scars, and there was no time to rest. The Apex army was not just a single force. They were part of a much larger empire, an empire that would surely retaliate. But now, Earth had proven something that no one could ignore. They could fight. They could survive, and they could win. Her feet crunched softly against the soil as she moved forward. Behind her, a small group of Earth's survivors gathered, the first to approach the battle site. They were cautious, their eyes wide with awe as they looked at the wreckage of the Apex's fallen machines. But there was something else in their eyes, a quiet, growing sense of hope. Kala could see it. She could feel it. The war had changed them. One of the survivors, a young woman, stepped forward. She was wearing the remnants of a military uniform. Her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes bright with a newfound fire. "You did it," she said, her voice unsteady at first, as though still trying to process what had happened. We never thought we could win, but you beat them. You made it possible." Kala nodded, not needing words. She knew what they were thinking. They had been a world on the brink, a world that had never stood a chance against the Apex. But now, in the ashes of defeat, they stood as something new, something stronger. "We all did it," Kala said, her voice firm. "It wasn't just me, it was all of you. We fought together, that's why we're still here." The young woman looked at her in awe, then glanced back at the battlefield, her face filled with determination. "What now?" she asked. "What do we do next?" Kala's gaze swept over the horizon. The question was simple, but its answer was complex. "We rebuild," she said simply. "We make sure this never happens again. We stand together, and we're ready for whatever comes next." Her eyes flashed with quiet intensity. She wasn't just talking about Earth's survival. She was talking about a new beginning, a future where Earth would no longer be a defenseless world, a footnote in the universe. It would be a place where humanity had earned its place not by appeasing or submitting to other powers, but by standing its ground and proving that it could rise, no matter how steep the odds. As she looked out toward the rising sun, the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness, She felt a stirring deep within her, a sense of purpose far beyond what she had imagined. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Vrax's empire was broken. The Apex army was in disarray, but the universe was vast, and humanity now had a place within it. No longer would they be the victims, they would be the protectors. They would be the ones who decided their fate. A soft breeze swept through the air, carrying the scent of fresh earth and new growth. Calla took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey behind her and the endless horizon of possibility ahead. The world had changed. Humanity had changed. With a final glance at the remnants of the Apex army, Calla turned toward the survivors, who were now gathering, looking to her not just as a fighter, but as a symbol of hope. A leader. We move forward, she said, her voice steady and strong. Together, and with that, the first steps toward a new era began. One where humanity, no longer a target, would become the force that stood against the darkness, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. In this final part, the story comes full circle with Calla reflecting on the cost of the battle and the uncertain future ahead. Earth has survived the invasion, but the work of rebuilding and preparing for future threats is just beginning. Calla's victory over the Apex army symbolizes not just a win in a single battle, but the birth of a new era for humanity, one where they stand united, stronger than ever before and ready for whatever may come. The themes of survival, resilience, and hope are central as Calla embraces her role as a leader, guiding humanity into a new dawn.